What's the most proudest video that you created? Because I think probably it's something which is aligned with your purpose as well. Which one would it be?
My stories in like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and Somaliland were very meaningful because they're parts of the world that only get a very negative aspect of their story told. And to go and tell a more human part of the story was fulfilling and scary. You know, I had people from those countries tell me not to come, and I had locals who had left, who had fled those countries telling me, you shouldn't go, and pushback from some friends and family on some of them, you know, and it is, you know, in some people's eyes, they can see me as a target, right, of kidnapping or whatever. And so there was some fear definitely involved.
Well, let's talk about Syria then.
Yeah.
We would love to cover more stories from Syria,
Yeah.
and we have all our, like, you know, freelance reporters and correspondents in different countries. I don't know if many people know this, but Syria is actually one of those countries that the Korean government can't even do like international banking with. So we cannot even pay people in Syria, even if they do work for us, because the banks, they do not transact with
Wow.
Syria. So then what are you supposed to do, pay people in Bitcoin? Or so it's that strict. So how do you actually go to Syria in the first place?
I've been thinking about it for a few years before going, and I found this guide on Instagram. Her name is Gaida, actually, and just fascinated by her story and her pictures. And you know, she would share that she would take people there, and she took a friend of mine there. So that planted the curiosity, and I'd followed her for a few years, and we kept talking. And during COVID, they closed, so it wasn't a possibility. And when they reopened, it was kind of like, okay, let's figure out how do we get there. And luckily for Swedish or French passport holder, there is like a visa application process, so they have to screen you. That takes a few weeks. Once you're accepted, which I don't know who they accept and who they don't accept, but Americans can't go, for example. But if you're European, you can. I think what passports do you guys hold?
People in our team, like German passport, Japanese passport, probably the most powerful passports in the world, right?
I think they could go, yeah. I think it's only mostly Americans and maybe a handful of others that can't. Yeah, you basically then have to fly in through Lebanon, because there aren't really many flights that go into Syria, and then you drive across the border, and there's like 20 checkpoints.
Wow.
First Lebanese checkpoints, and they're like, "You're really going?" It's like, yeah.
And it's like then, heavily secured in terms of guns and everything, right?
And as you get closer, it's quite a sad approach, because tons of refugee camps in Lebanon. So you see like kids literally playing on the highway. Like it's a crazy sight as you get closer. And they're treated quite poorly. They're all like crammed in these camps and pretty bad living conditions, and you see that, you know, as you drive through it.
Are you allowed to film that type of thing, or not?
So I didn't really film those. I kind of filmed it a little bit from the car, you know, but we didn't stop or anything, because it is a bit complicated. I'm not sure. You probably could, but you might need permits. I also think some people in those camps probably wouldn't be too happy to be filmed.
Yeah.
But yeah, then when you arrive into Syria, it's there's some things like I maybe can say and maybe some I can't.
Sure.
But you have to transact a little bit with some of the guards, and that helps.
How much?
Yeah, so that just helps speed up the process, so they don't, you know, check too much on what I have in my bag filled with camera gear and whatnot. And there's about 15 checkpoints to get into the city. And then you arrive in Damascus, and I started in Old Damascus, which is actually beautiful. It's also quite a bit destroyed, but mostly it's been kept intact. But the outskirts of the city were, it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever witnessed, when you realize that these were neighborhoods that were inhabited. Like the level of destruction is impossible to describe or comprehend. You get there and it doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
You know, it looks like just an abandoned city that was maybe never finished, but actually people lived there, and it's just been destroyed. So nothing can really psychologically prepare you.
Yeah. Were you like the only pretty much white guy there?
Yeah. I think I saw a handful of other tourists, but not too many. I mean, it was in some ways it was beautiful because the locals were so eager to connect with the outside world. And I didn't get this until the end of the trip, but I asked the guide, like, why are they all so happy to see me everywhere I go? Everyone is so happy. And she said, actually, seeing you to them represents hope, because it means that maybe things are getting safer if foreigners dare to come here with a camera and walking around on the street. And yeah, it's hard not to tear up, you know, in those moments. And all of the interactions that I had to that point just had so much more meaning and depth afterwards, right?
So people are still really struggling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But they still try to hold on to hope. You know, they're immensely strong and kind humans, like genuine kindness. You know, they come up on the street and they just want you to come to their house and eat and have tea, and like they're like insisting, you know, they're like, please come to my house. And we're like, well, we're going right now, but thank you, you know. Yeah, it was powerful experience in empathy building, you know, because growing up living in Europe, the first time I really heard about Syrian people was through the refugee crisis when they came. We saw many in France and in Sweden, the two countries that I'm from. Sweden accepted hundreds of thousands. I know that millions in total, like refugees, or over 1 million, but I don't know how many from Syria, but I think very many. I met many people in Syria. I was like, oh, my cousin, he's in Sweden. I was like, cool, man. So I felt an immense desire to connect, and all of them, like a very strong desire from everyone that I met to have a sense of normalcy in their life. All of the early 20s people and teenagers just basically mostly remember their life or childhood during war. They just want to live, you know, especially now that you have social media, they can see how others are living. They just want to be able to buy a plane ticket and not be denied because they think you're leaving and never coming back. They want to be able to, you know, transact with the world and exist. And right now people are they're still quite stuck.
Do you know what the latest is on, because I know they were also affected by the earthquake.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
we never hear about them, right? That's the thing in the mainstream media. Like, you hear about Turkey a little bit.
Yeah.
But then what about the Syrian side?
It was devastating because so they've been sparred or blocked by the international community to receive any transactions and aid. It's a sanction on the government, which, you know, is beyond my opinion, but that's what they've done. And so now during this crisis, Turkey was able to receive a lot more aid than Syria, even though Syria was struggling equally, if not as much, since they had no resources. So it was quite devastating for Syria, and they just felt quite hopeless because they're already a country struggling economically. They don't have aid. So yeah, I had a few friends who lost friends in the earthquake. So it was mostly the northern side, and most of the people I know lived in Damascus, but yeah, I did touch a bit of the coast as well. And it's hard to not feel, you know, you just actually witness how unfair a lot of the world is. You know, just because I was born here, I have a passport that allows me to go everywhere, and you're born here and you can't go anywhere. The feeling of passport privilege and just privilege in general, like, was very real when you go to those places. And I try not to see it from, I think a lot of people, this topic of privilege is a bit tricky because it comes sometimes with guilt and shame, you know, like, oh, you're privileged. But I think it should be more from a humility standpoint and gratitude for damn, I have privileges in my life that I get to enjoy, and I thus want to try and use my privilege to hopefully make other people's lives better in some way, shape, or form with what I have in my toolkit of being able to influence the world. But it is definitely tough. You know, you leave a place like Syria and your friends are still there. And not everyone wants to leave, but they all would like to be able to have the freedom to go somewhere and come back.
So they don't have that freedom because of the government?
Yeah, so their passport is very bad. It's very hard it's I think the second to worst, if not, I think now Afghanistan is the worst passport, and then Syria and Iraq. So you can, but it's very difficult. One, from the government standpoint, to let you leave because they think that when you're leaving you might never come back. And then from the other country standpoint as well, they don't want to let you in because when you get in you might immediately seek asylum and then not go back. So a lot of countries don't want to even grant you the tourist visa to leave. And then obviously budget as well. Not all, like, everyone struggles a bit with work, so not everyone can buy a expensive plane ticket, and then you got to get the car to cross into Lebanon and do all these things. So
logistically challenging, just legal restrictions.
Yeah, Yeah.
I think, I mean, it's hard not to think and get political about this, but I think a lot of people also confuse the fact that there's the government
Yeah.
and there's its people, which is separate, right? So just because you just said that there's a sanction against the government, but at the end of the day, it's the ordinary citizens that suffer.
Yeah.
Because they don't, I mean, natural disasters happens everywhere, but why should they suffer because of the government?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very sad, and I mean, it is a problem that, you know, I heard from everybody, their struggles with it. You know, they can't get, as you said, I don't think anyone can really send international wires directly to Syria. They don't have proper banking system that really functions internationally. So they're very restricted, and it makes, if you want to visit there, you have to basically just bring a ton of cash because you can't take any out when you're there. Yeah, you know, I just hope that the next generations of Syrians will have more freedom, more prosperity. But with this earthquake, it was just like, yeah. When I already know firsthand how hard it's been, then seeing this, it was just like, damn, they really can't catch a break. Yeah, I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to go and the privilege to try to capture a bit of their story. And ultimately, what I have to remember when I go there is it's not my story, so I also have to be very attentive to what people are telling me. And although I can share a bit of my perspective, I also want to honor the fact that Syrians particularly don't get their story told fairly quite often. And it's a very, just talking about Syria can be divisive within Syrians.
We've been told it many, many times.
Yeah.
Just by bringing it up,
Oh yeah.
all of a sudden we are the bad guys.
Yeah. I mean, I had people tell me not to post the video like on different sides of the conflict, just because they thought just making a video, just having gone to Syria was political.
Yeah.
Just having the fact that I went was a political decision. You know, and I want to respect that opinion as well. But that's what makes it quite stressful at times when you go to these conflict zones, because they're still active, right? They're not done, and there's no consensus on what is happening. Or in another Westerner's perspective is like, people are worried about it because I'm never going to fully absorb or understand or empathize with how the locals there are truly feeling.
Yeah.
So I can only do my best to be there for a short period, and then with my short glimpse, try and tell their story more than mine. So when I go to these places, I almost use your guys' approach a bit more of, let me just let them talk. Like, I can speak a little bit, but my opinion feels a little bit irrelevant in this moment. I would rather highlight their voices because those are the ones that people don't always get to hear.
Yeah.
I think that's what's beautiful about letting people speak, right? I think if you are only watching the world through the lens of the news, it looks very different than when you look at it from the lens of the humans who are living in that place. Because my goal is not political. I'm not here to voice my political opinion or make a statement. And I also don't think that there'll be much value in that, because it's so much more complicated than whatever I could interpret in a week. So I feel that the value that I can bring is making people feel connected to the humans there in the same way that I felt connected to the humans there. So that's what I try and focus on. And as long as my story feels that it does that, then I feel like I've succeeded.